of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, well, thank you everybody for coming to the Council of Councils meeting. My name is Sandra Gwynn, and I am the chair for tonight's meeting. I'm also the chair for Neighborhood Council 4. I want to welcome Mayor Bob Kelly and Commissioner Rick Tryon to our meeting tonight. So we'll just go ahead and do roll call. So as I call out your council, just let us know you're here. Number 1.
Here.
2.
Here.
3. She's on her way, I understand. 5.
Yes.
6.
Here.
7.
Here.
8.
Here.
And 9.
Here.
All right, so we definitely have a quorum, and so this is a duly called meeting. So we'll get right to old business, approval of the minutes from the May 23rd, 2023 meeting. Did everyone have a chance to look at those? Are there any corrections, additions, questions? All right, well, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
I make a motion to accept.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second.
Any more discussion? Audience members? All right, so we have a motion to accept the minutes as presented. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, all opposed. Okay, we have a secretary vacancy tonight. The member who had been appointed back in January moved out of her council district, and so she did have to resign the position. So this would be just for tonight's meeting. We'll be electing new officers in January, but for tonight, we do have to have a secretary. And I don't want to see any fisticuffs or anything like that, so, but I can see that's not going to be a problem. So, anybody? Okay, have to have a secretary. There has to be a secretary.
I suggest Earl Sally.
Oh. I'm not even supposed to be here.
Look what happened.
That's what happens.
Sandra, I'll take notes for you.
Can you do that, Eric?
Yeah.
Thank you so very much. Eric also did the minutes the last time too, and thank you, he does an excellent job. So thanks, Eric, for multitasking there. Okay, so moving on to new business. We're happy to have city officials here to talk to us about the public safety levy, and it's my understanding this is completely different than what you've been presenting before, kind of what the next steps are and what will happen if the levy doesn't pass. And so, Greg, I think I'll just turn it over to you and let you introduce everybody and take it from here.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks again, everybody, for having us to visit with you. I'm sure you haven't heard anything about the Great Falls Public Safety Levy or bond request at all. We're going to change things up a little bit tonight, as you shared, and I'll explain that in a little bit. But you've introduced the two elected officials that are here, Mayor Kelly and Commissioner Tryon. We also have Chief Jones, we have Captains Schaefer, Otto, and Moccasin. We have Karen Young, who's the 911 operations manager, and Rachel Darlington, who's the records clerk. And I think I got all the staff except for David Dennis, who is also here. And I think that gets all the staff. So thank you for being here tonight and being a part of this presentation. We have touched on the topic of what happens if the levy and the bond does not pass, if the voters choose not to approve those two questions a little bit in our original presentation. So we thought we would focus on that because we have received a lot of questions in our presentations, not only to the neighborhood councils, but to outside groups. Well, what does it look like if they're not successful, or if one passes and the other doesn't? So we're going to take you through a journey of what that may look like for the community. And just as a general disclaimer right up front, we're not trying to scare anybody, because some of the comments that we've heard is just some of the facts that we've provided folks. Folks have felt that we were trying to intimidate or scare them into voting a certain way on this whole thing. That just really isn't our intent. Our heart in all of this is just to provide information and perspective from the professionals that provide these services about what the current impact is and what the future looks like. And that's what they will offer tonight. Some of it you've heard, but I think some of it might be a little bit different and just be helpful to understand the nature of the ask and the impact and the realities of the levy and the bond not passing for the community. So we'll walk you through a PowerPoint presentation, and we'll just start off with, if it passes, what does that look like? And then I'm going to move into what if the bond passes and the levy fails, what if the levy passes and the bond fails, and then what if they both fail. So we'll kind of go in that sequence if that sounds acceptable to everybody. And then we'll get into the different department impacts. So if the levy and the bond both pass, the next steps are going to be interesting for the community because this is going to be a slow ramp up. People are not going to see immediate relief in the event that both pass. And I think we've done a pretty good job making that clear as we've gone and provided information. It's probably going to be a 2 to 3 year process at a minimum because there's a lot of contingent factors. We'll need to develop a formal implementation plan. That's going to look a little bit different. I think you recall me saying that I think that it's going to be the toughest for the police department to fulfill the levy asks, then fire, and then court and legal in that order. And whatever the implementation plan ultimately will look like, it's something that the City Commission is going to have to consent to because it's going to require funding. And as we've learned with passage of the change in the city charter for mills, for the public library, there needs to be enough cash to implement what's being proposed. And so the first tax bill that actually, if this is passed, if both of these are passed, the first tax bill won't go to the taxpayer until December of '24. And so if it were to pass, you still have a good year before there's enough funding to cover the cost associated with it. There might be some things that we could do in the short term, but in terms of cash flow coming in, that's not going to happen until those tax bills go out. And then what we will end up doing is providing more detail on the implementation of that plan when we do our quarterly budget updates to the City Commission at a work session. So people will have a better understanding of what we're able to accomplish within that time frame. The Public Safety Fund will be a separate and distinct fund, so if you've ever heard my budget presentation before, you didn't fall asleep in the first minute or two, you'll know that the city has about 58 different funds. This will be one fund of those 58, maybe 59, depends on the year. It'll be a separate and distinct fund that will require approval from the City Commission on an annual basis that the public will be able to comment on. So again, cash flow is kind of critical to the implementation piece of it, and again, depending on what is approved and passed and where our cash flow situation is for our fund balance will dictate when we'll be able to start implementing this. Go ahead on slide 2. If the bond passes but the levy fails, the city will still pursue the needed improvements that you've been presented before. We still need an additional fire station for coverage issues, so there will be the pursuit of land acquisition and construction cost to construct a new facility. Also, the fire department would proceed with replacing necessary pieces of equipment that are outdated and part of the replacement plan that they have for mostly their fire vehicles, their large trucks. In talking with our bond council about implementation of this, we can implement this in phases. So it's not going to just be one big bond. It'll probably be 4. It'll probably be broken into land and fire station construction, fire station equipment, police renovation, and legal office space renovation as well, which is the last 2 on that slide. So that's good because there's a little flexibility that we don't have to commit to all of it at once, only when we're ready to go, but I'm sure that there's some limitations on it that I'm not aware of that will play into that as well as we break out which projects would actually be constructed and when. We go on to slide 3. If the levy passes and the bond fails, then we've talked on the first slide about what that passage looks like and a time frame for it. but it would also require the departments to go back and evaluate revenue options to address needs and equipment. So the city does have a little bit of flexibility, and not a lot, in non-voted general obligation debt. We would look to our fund balance accruals to see if there's any flexibility in there to put towards public safety to address some needs. Usually those are one-time needs because your fund balance fluctuates. It's not really good for operations, but can be utilized for capital improvements. We would obviously continue with grant applications and seeking equipment replacement with those to the extent that we can. And then the other thing that we talked about was the impact on development. So the community is growing, there may be an opportunity there to capture some of the impact of growth and address some of the needs for public safety on the capital fund going ahead. Again, just a thought, an idea, and under construction. It's something that would take a lot of conversation with the city commission and the community as well. Going on to slide 4, if the levy passes but the bond fails, well, one thing that we're going to do, and I probably should have put this on one of the first slides, is that staff will do an internal debrief about the education process for the public safety levy and bond, and we will share those thoughts with the commission. I'm sure that they'll have their own thoughts. When the last public safety levy failed in 2009, we didn't do this. I think we basically just kind of shrugged our shoulders and said, okay, that didn't work, and I will make do with what we have and continue to provide the services to the best that our resources allow. I think this situation is a little bit different for the community because we are experiencing some level of growth, and we don't have capacity just to deal with what we're facing now in some areas, never mind what may happen in a few years. And that information is going to be valuable for future conversations, because I do think that there's a high probability, based on what I've seen prior commissions who have looked at this particular topic and future commissions that will be inheriting this, is what are our options, and I'm going to get into a little bit more detail about that. But I would say that it's probably a high probability that the voters would see a revised question in the future again. Some acute needs that arrive or the departments may face if both questions fail, it might be redirecting some of our dollars from other areas. And I'm going to show you why that's not a fantastic idea here in a second. It's part of that worksheet that I sent you, and you'll see it on a slide here. There's not a lot of funds to redirect into public safety as it is, and there would be some pretty significant impacts to existing services that I think people expect the city to provide under those areas that you see in that second bullet point. We would take a look at reconfiguring our public safety services, reducing, eliminating, or maybe even charging for certain services that the public hasn't seen in the past. And that's just one way to address getting some of the core service areas addressed and funded, is to reduce things that can be deferred or aren't critical in the service nature to the public. You'll hear in more detail from the departments about some of those areas. There's the potential out there to utilize unspent ARPA or CARES funding for one-time needs. Again, because that was a one-time allocation, it's not something that the city would see on a continuous basis, but certainly if there's some availability after we work through our Tier 1 projects for ARPA, that we might have the ability to fund some capital needs later on. And then obviously just visit with the commission, and it's probably going to be a new commission with some new folks on there, so they might have a different approach that they would want to take a look at and discuss as well. So slide 5, we've got a lot of questions about this, and it relates to the handout that I provided you. It's just a breakout of the general fund. The general fund is where all the property tax dollars go, and it's what supports public safety. And you can see that almost 80% of it currently goes to public safety. You can see on your Excel spreadsheet, there's a breakout for administration, and I would just point out, because there's just so many ways I can dissect this for everybody and keep it understandable. There's an amount called miscellaneous administration. It's a $1.1 million in fiscal year '24. A lot of that is capital investment into public safety related items. I don't have the breakout here for you now, but I just want to call that out. Park and Recreation gets an allocation of 9%, and then transfers out, which is formerly used to be funding for the library, but it supports other funds in the city budget for services, planning, community development, natural resources, which is the group that takes care of the parks and tree trimming, swimming pools, recreation, and then down to, I guess that was it for Civic Center Engineering. We did not fund them this past year. If you take a look on the next slide, even though almost 80% of our general property tax dollars goes to the general fund to support public safety, it still is not enough to cover the actual cost of it. So I wanted to provide this breakout that shows even with that tax revenue, we still have a public safety shortfall of about $6.5 million. If you've ever attended one of my budget presentations, this is one of those notorious slides that pops up every year that shows without the entitlement share from the state of Montana, we would not be able to cover public safety with our property tax dollars under the statewide spending tax cap. And our entitlement share from the state of Montana is about $9.3 million as well. So hopefully that provides a little perspective on when we have heard the question and we understand it, and it's a good question. Why don't you redirect funds from other areas of your budget to cover these needs? What I'm sharing with you tonight is that those needs are currently not being met locally with local tax dollars without entitlement share from the state of Montana. And in order for us to go and redirect those dollars, if you were to add up the admin group, the park and rec, and the transfers out, that's not going to come close to what would be needed to fully operate departments as they exist today. So even if you got rid of me, which has been suggested, it might make a small dent there, but it's going to be entirely inadequate to cover current operations, never mind the needs that the departments have identified for the community and the commission has identified through those two questions that are being put out to the voters. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it along to Jeremy, and he's going to walk you through some of the impacts on Great Falls Fire Rescue.
Thank you. So the first slide on slide 7, it kind of hits, and this is taking that the bond and the mill levy are unsuccessful, right? Is we'll perform a comprehensive analysis and department priorities. We've been doing that for multiple years now, and that's why we're at the S that we're at today, right? We've been trimming what we can, we reduce services where we can, no longer going to minor medical emergencies. There's really not much left, but our mission will still be in the core functions of the services we provide. And those are the emergency medical services, fire response, and our fire prevention code enforcement, along with emergency preparedness. We'll continue to do those, we'll just be stretched more and more thin. So, and it's been part of the presentation to the councils and to the public, but what happens if we don't start addressing this with our public safety and Levy and Bond? And it's been very clear that we will continue to regress as we get audited every 5 years. We're about 2.5 years away. So we can start to plan on that regression being an automatic thing, especially as we start to see the boundaries of our community continue to expand and the growth that we're seeing, the call volume increasing. There just isn't anything left to address and stretch anymore. So that will be affecting homeowners and businesses as we continue to go through the ISO audit process. Another thing that's really been a major increase as of late is our overtime. Not only just overtime, but over the last couple of years, we've had to implement something that we've never had in my entire career, where we have mandatory overtime. Where we can't fill positions, so crew getting, or personnel getting off shift, actually are forced to stay for another shift. because we have minimum manning, and that's that 13 that we've all talked about in our presentations, right? To maintain that we stay at 13 and don't drop below that, we've had to force people. What that does is that correlates straight into an increase in overtime usage. So, and that's because of maintaining the minimum manning, but also calling back off-duty personnel during emergency incidents to utilize that resource. So we've had the conversation, if we have a house fire, right, we have nothing left in reserves, we go to an automatic callback of off-duty personnel. We do that today during emergent events, but we're starting to see these surge events happen more and more and more, where we might actually have to do that as part of a routine-based service, you know, as we present to the city manager and the commission, that we might be pulling that trigger sooner than we ever used to, which is gonna have a direct correlation to what our overtime costs are for that. And the big one is really where we go on our prevention and code enforcement side. So as we see the expanded boundaries of our community keep pushing further out, and we already know that we can't protect those adequately, we're gonna have to come before the city manager and the commission with some things we haven't brought before. Being more stringent in the development review process as far as it relates to fire codes and life safety systems. By adopting permitting policies to allow that people have to get permits through the fire department to continue to expand, to have your large events, if you will. So if you have a carnival on 10th Avenue South, they would actually have to permit that through the fire department because you're talking about a high hazard, high population event, to make sure that we know so we can staff appropriately. These are things that we'll have to start looking at, which could hinder some of the growth in the policies that we're seeing within our community. And that's about all we can address. The rest we've addressed throughout the years and presented to get to where we are today.
So from the police department perspective, you know, we've done much like the fire department, and this has been over several years. We've made adjustments to where we've streamlined bureaus and personnel to where we're putting them into the core functions. And we're at that point now where we're having to start getting it to take a crucial look at the type of calls and things that we are responding to. You know, in the presentations, we talked about crime, traffic, and quality of life issues as our priorities. What we're gonna look at, we're gonna even do a deeper dive as we continue forward about the officer response priorities, focusing, preserving, protecting life, enforcing criminal laws, and maintaining public order. Those are gonna be the three priorities we're gonna focus, and if it doesn't fit into those, some of those things might have to sit off to the side and wait. If it's not a violent crime, because we've seen the uptick in violent crime that we've had in the presentations, we're keeping peace. It's gonna be prioritized based on the analysis of what we're seeing. So we have to do a look at all of these different things, and days have passed where you might get an officer coming to take something cold, cold theft or things along those lines. That may be something that you wait hours, if not maybe even a couple days before we get to it. Because we are just at a point now we can't do that anymore. So from the patrol perspective, the officers that you see on the street handling the calls, they're the initial responders. They're the ones that are gonna go out and deal with what's going on. We're gonna reduce obviously we've seen this already, the reduction in the high visibility deterrence patrols. We just don't have that capability anymore for our officers to be out doing those things in the neighborhoods that they wanna do. We just don't have that bandwidth anymore to be able to do those things. Proactive traffic enforcement, we talked about that. If anybody's driven on 10th, you know the traffic problems and the traffic crash numbers are very high for Great Falls. We can't address those without staffing. So those will be things that are just gonna have to continue the way they are and work if we can at some point in time. Alarm response. So we have the false alarms or any type of alarm, business alarms or residential alarms. There's a point where we're gonna have to make a decision. Are we gonna be going to these or are we not gonna be going to these? So there'll be an analysis of the way we are going to look at that, but that might be something that will be cut as well. And then welfare checks. Not everybody the community will see something and thinking it's an issue that the police need to be there for, but we're gonna have certain criteria we're gonna set before we're gonna go to a welfare check. It's not everybody's gonna get a policeman coming to check on if they're okay, or because they're sitting on a bench and they look like they might be drunk or something. we're not gonna go to those. That's gonna be something, we're gonna have to take a strong look at how we're gonna deal with those type of things. So those are just options that are there. From the investigative side, the focus will be on violent crime against persons. That's the plain and simple thing. We have seen that huge uptick based on the narcotics use and the drug problem in Great Falls. So with that comes violent crime, and that's where the focus is going to go. Property crimes, so if we have felony vandalisms, arsons, frauds, all those type of things, they're gonna become a lower priority. Even if it's a felony, it's going to become a lower priority because the focus will be on the violent crime against a person aspect. Investigations on children endangered by exposure to drugs. Those are bad, but again, those are something as well that we're gonna have to look at. Are we gonna work every single one of those that come in? Because there's a large volume of those that come across. We may have to turn that over to the Department of Family Service and say, you're gonna have to handle that one, and we're not gonna be able to get involved. It's the nature of what we're doing. We talked about the SROs and the importance of having the SROs in the schools. We wouldn't get those 2 extra SROs, so the SROs will focus primarily on the high school and middle schools, and the elementary schools will get it if it's a high priority response. We may have to have a patrol officer go there, but the SROs are dealing with a high volume of calls already in cases in their daily routines. So that would be something the elementaries will have to wait. And of course, I talked about our drug problem, but the biggest problem is the fentanyl. Fentanyl is the most dangerous that we're seeing because we have overdoses, and that's the one that we have to work on the most. So that'll be the highest priority. Other drugs, if we have the ability to, but fentanyl is gonna be the number one that we're gonna focus on. And then from the support side, Support Services Bureau, that has been the bureau that has taken, had the most personnel removed from it over the years to bolster investigations and patrol. Support is kind of one of those things that you want to have all the nice things, the quality of life things, but there's a point where we're not going to even be able to keep up doing the things that we want to do. We have a contract with the Housing Authority, and that may be something that will be reviewed. Are we going to keep an officer there, or are we going to pull that officer back in and put that person on the street? We just don't know yet. That's something we're going to evaluate. I don't know how many in here have been through our Citizens Academy, or if you've ever thought about it. That may be something that will get cut, as much as we don't want to, because that gives the community the understanding of what we do. We may have to set that one aside and just wait for a while on that. Any community outreach programs, those are, they're tasking for individuals to be at them, to man hours and time that they have to be there. Like the Coffee with a Cop or any safety presentations, things along those lines, they will become even more scrutinized as where we do it. And I know that the neighborhood councils love to have an officer come and talk about different things that are going on. We're gonna scrutinize it even more because we just don't have the staffing to be able to do that. Training programs and travel. So our officers have to have training throughout the year. There's required hours that they have to meet for their post requirements. And we do bring schools in, but some of the schools that they need that are of higher quality, you have to travel for those. It might be going to Billings, Missoula. It might be going out of state because someplace else is hosting that school that we need. And we may have to look at how we're going to change that and not have some of those things go on. So that's a detriment to the officers for their educational benefit and to become better investigators and better with the public and doing the things that they do. They have to have those, but it's something that we will evaluate as well. And then our recruitment side, obviously we're changing the way we recruit officers and trying to look at different methods of recruitment, but that requires manpower, time, and that might be something we have to figure out how we're going to do that with the least amount possible. So those are just the areas that we're going to be focused on as we move forward.
For the legal department, the theme is much the same. These gentlemen like to politely refer to it as prioritization. I kind of like to think of it as, who are we not going to get to? What emergency are we not going to get to? What crime are we not going to get to? And it's the same in the legal department. The function and goal and purpose of the legal department is to deter crime, to protect the public and to get some satisfaction for victims of crime. And at this point in time, we don't have the resources, and you've probably heard me say this ad nauseum, we don't have the resources to handle the caseload that we have. What does that mean? That means that we don't have the hours, the employee hours to handle the caseload hours that we have to deal with. So, and that situation's gonna get worse with the addition of the second court, because the court has acted as sort of a choke point for us, slowing down cases as they come through. We're still overwhelmed, the court's overwhelmed, but as we add that second judge in 2024, then that's gonna open up the speed of the cases coming through the court system, and that's gonna overwhelm us even more. How do we reduce hours if we don't have additional resources? How do we reduce hours spent on our caseload? We do that two ways. We reduce the number of cases that we have, which means that there are certain categories of cases that we don't prosecute, or we dismiss cases more readily. The other way we do that is we spend less time on complex cases. And the way we do that is we plead out cases. So if you take the bottom 20% of cases, say 20% of our cases, it's like everything else. 20% of our cases account for 80% of our work. They're the most difficult cases. If we want to look at the biggest bang for our buck in reducing our caseload, we're going to make easier plea deals on the cases that are the hardest to prosecute, but that require the most time. That's how it will look in our office. Now, we're going to do that in a way that we're trying to still protect deterrence of crime and protection of the public and getting satisfaction for victims. But that's going to be a complicated dance, and it's going to require an analysis of the types of our cases, how much time they take, and which ones that we may be able to plead out or dismiss and still accomplish our goals, and we'll have to work with Great Falls Police Department to do that. We can't draw resources over from our civil department right now. We don't have the resources in the civil department to add those resources over to the prosecution side, simply because we wouldn't be able to serve the civil departments in our city. And that would slow down city processes, city civil processes like planning and public utilities. I would say, more than people might perceive them to be slowed down right now. So that's what it looks like in our department, and we'll do everything we can to continue to try to reach our goals, but we're not going to reach them as well as we could. And as time goes on, and you see these activities increase, we'll be less able to achieve the goals that we want to in our department.
Judge Bolstead couldn't be here tonight, so David's going to pinch hit for him and just kind of quickly cover the municipal court piece.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, we have one municipal court judge who has an immense amount of work. We'll have two moving forward, and they're going to need at least some administrative support for that new judge, so that the judge can't handle all the workload of a judge on their own. They're looking for one additional clerk to assist the new municipal court judge in accomplishing that person's duties. In addition, one of the real problems we've had down in municipal court is getting juries impaneled. They send out a lot of juror questionnaires. They get not so many back, and then on trial day, oftentimes they don't have enough jurors show up to impanel a jury. So, especially with the addition of an additional judge, so we'll be having more trials. We'll need more jurors. They really need somebody to coordinate the juror process. Somebody that can reach out to jurors, can follow up on the juror questionnaires that have been sent out, find out why people aren't returning them, find out why people aren't showing up, and get people. Just a contact can get people coming in, if they know that you're paying attention to whether they're coming in for jury service or not. So they really need an additional jury clerk there. If we don't have that, then the situation is gonna get worse. And there'll be more dismissals based on speedy trial issues because we can't get folks to trial. Finally, they're looking for a compliance officer to handle the increase they have in warrants, and the increase they'll have in non-compliance of court mandated programs like anger management, drug and alcohol rehab, mental health treatment, things that the court requires defendants to do at sentencing, that they don't have the ability to follow up on to make sure that those folks are doing those things. And with the addition, again, of another judge, that's gonna be even a bigger struggle, and they won't be able to do that. So again, you have this issue of, is our court system, prosecution system really working for the public to accomplish the goals that it's supposed to accomplish?
I think you've heard me say in the presentations, the regular presentation that you've all heard, that we recognize that this is a tough ask. But as I sit here and listen to my colleagues here, I think this is the toughest part of the conversation. This is pretty uncomfortable to peel the curtain back to this extent and share with the community what some of the potential outcomes may be over time in terms of not meeting some of the resource needs that they've shared with you. And there's certainly no joy in going there, but I also think that that hesitancy has not necessarily translated into the understanding that the community also deserves to hear. And I think that was part of the concern, if I remember back in 2009, with some of the concerns back then, was that we don't want the community to feel that we're not capable of doing the job that we're being asked to do. But we also believe, after visiting with many groups around the community, that there's an expectation that we will tell you if we're deficient in some areas of service. And that's part of this tough conversation tonight, is laying that out in a way that is just very sobering. But we do believe that people want to know that information, because people are just as interested in what will we get if we pass both of these questions, and what will we get if we don't. And please understand that this is not like a light switch, that some of these things that you heard tonight are definitely occurring presently, and if both questions fail and the voters choose not to vote them and support them through the information that they've been provided and their choice in doing so, it's not like we're gonna flick a switch and like, okay, we're gonna show you now what that looks like. What we're trying to do tonight is prepare the community so we don't hear things again like we heard as we went around, and that is, why am I just hearing about this now? You know, why haven't we heard these concerns before? We're trying to prepare the community for additional conversations that will be difficult in terms of providing proper resources. But I certainly also want to convey that we have incredible employees in the public safety departments that we have. And as I've said before, thank God that we do, that we ask them to do a lot with a little, and they will continue to do the absolute best that they can for the community, regardless of the outcome of this, because their heart is to serve the community. And I have no doubt that they'll continue to do that. So with that, Madam Chair, we're prepared to take questions if that's how you would like to proceed at this point.
That'll be fine. So I have just a question. Are there other cities in Montana that have kind of behind the eight ball like we are? And if so, how have they managed? You know, have they, I know Helena has passed, I think it's been a couple of safety levies, right?
Yeah, there's a few communities, I'm not sure that, I think Kalispell may be the one larger city that hasn't, but they're currently calling us to ask us how we're doing ours.
Oh, okay.
So I think that there's a lot of things happening that go beyond the borders of Great Falls in the state of Montana. Montana has been discovered, right? You can kind of blame COVID for that to some extent. People are moving here and there is an impact. And we're not the only community that are dealing with drug issues like you've heard. I mean, they're happening all over the state. And so many large communities are struggling with dealing with the growth and some of the unpleasantries that come along with that. I think there's some realities that come along with it. It's not just about the Olive Garden, it's about the impacts that occur well beyond that on crime and issues that arise because of that. So we're not alone. I know that Billings has passed a few. I can't speak to Helena directly. Missoula recently had one on, they withdrew it, and I'm not sure what the thought process was entirely behind that, but I'm not sure if they had or have not adopted one previously. But public safety is a big conversation amongst the city managers. We just had Montana League Cities and Towns annual meeting. We're able to meet with them, and that's something that I've heard is on everybody's radar.
Thank you. Other questions? Yes, Lisa?
I've got one for Captain Otto. I've heard a lot about the other parts of the department and the things that will impact that. What about, like you were talking about having increased violent crime, more drugs, and I've heard more resisting arrest, more assaults on officers, all those kinds of things. How will that impact HRU going forward? Because I know that a lot of the stuff that they have requires special training and special tools and all those kinds of things. I haven't heard much about how that's going to be impacted, because I think there's an upward tick in having them deployed or used more often.
You know, the frequency I've seen over the years, they're getting used more frequent just because of the nature of what we're dealing with. We've gotten better in our ways of training and understanding how those type of situations unfold, how they what they need for response, and it's more comprehensive than sending a group of patrol officers to it. We now utilize our HRU or SWAT members is what that basically is, to go in and deal with these situations. And the training that they do, you know, they have set training days throughout the year, and that's just, you know, what we've established. But there's still additional training that they have to do, you know, for explosive breaching, for other you know, important pieces of it, for our negotiators, all of those different things. They have to have additional training. We're still going to have to figure out a way to keep them sharp. And again, like the city manager pointed out, thank goodness we have very strong people that are really good at what they do, that they can continue to train in the best way possible and teach in the best way possible. So there is an uptick, yes, and that's just one thing we're going to look at even closer, but they're still going to get used. We're not going to back away from that. It's just we're going to have to take a look at how we're going to slice that as we move forward.
Other questions?
Sandra,
Yes.
so everybody knows I've made it public, I'm voting for the levy, but let me make a statement that a lot of people maybe have talked about and have concerns in the fact that it's a budgetary item, and they're concerned about seeing their property tax statement before they vote. I called the financial office of the county last week on behalf of the neighbors. It went to the printer on Wednesday. The county expects it back the first part of this week to be mailed yet this week or the first part of next week. That is a huge item for a lot of particularly elderly homeowners, because they have a fixed budget. They want to see what the property tax statement is before they cast a vote. I just passed that information along for what it's worth. And quite frankly, considering the number of elderly homeowners in the state, in the city, I mean, it's important.
And if I could, just to ask Greg, about that issue. The levy is, up to 103.75 mil, I believe. The note I've got on it here. Given the increase in the value of the mill, and this issue came up in relation to the library levy as well. It's kind of late, in fact, it's too late on the library levy, but for the safety levy going forward, it is available if we're going to look at, you mentioned at the beginning that we would be, there would be really no tax collected on this until 2024. And so we would have to, as I understand it, however the city commission at that time is constituted, that the city commission will have the opportunity to lower the mills. And I know it's impossible to forecast now, but the budget in the FY25 budget, which will come up in 24, but as I understand it, it will be before the tax is collected. There will be the opportunity to lower the mills, collect the same amount of money, or the same amount of money to meet the needs expressed by the department heads, but that the mill would actually be lower. That opportunity is there. I'm not saying that it would definitely happen, but I've heard that question many times and that concern many times here recently since the library levy passed. And the city commission was in the position of having to certify the mills after the value had gone up, and yet did not lower the mills to meet the increased value of the mill. Does that make sense? So just as an assurance, there will be an opportunity to lower the mills if the numbers work out.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and there's a long answer behind that, but to answer your question specifically, yes. And I really wish that I could give a better answer on
Right,
some
I
of the
understand.
mechanics of it, but there are just factors out there that we're waiting to resolve, like tax appeals and protests. That could potentially have an impact on our taxable valuation. And then another thing is just simply cash flow and the amount of money that will be in the general fund just to support regular operations, never mind initiating, if this were to pass, some of that. But yes, the commission will have to decide, just as a matter of course, during the budget process, how much they're gonna raise. The only thing I would just add there is that's gonna be very contingent on what they need for cash flow and the timing of which the departments believe they can execute portions of what has been approved by the voters. But that is very likely to happen in an incremental fashion. And so my thought is that they will not need to raise the full amount from the get-go, but that is gonna be contingent on cash flow.
Because the language on the ballot is up to.
Up to,
Okay,
yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions?
Take place.
Oh, go ahead.
Yes, sir, thank you. Mr. Dolan, I understood, and also Mr. Rick, that we're gonna have to have the money in the bank, if you will, in order to do all this. So I think I hear you saying that we're not gonna be able to really give any support, personnel-wise, fire station start, et cetera, until we get the money in the bank? Is that what I heard?
Yes. There are, well, yes. I always like to complicate my responses, but generally, yes, we'll leave it at that.
Did either one of you fellows have anything you wanted to ask? Okay.
City Manager Doyle, let me ask you this. I saw up there when we were talking about a new judge. It said the judge would go on the payroll January of 2024. Yet if the bond issue mill levy passes, we don't have that in revenue until January of 25. How does he get paid?
Yeah, that position is part of the regular budget that was adopted by the city.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Okay, all right, if anybody have any closing remarks you'd like to make?
Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you. Mayor, Rick, do you have anything you'd like to add or say? Okay.
Appreciate all the opportunities that you've provided to us through your councils for us to go to. I think what you see before you, around you, are people who have been trying to work their best to educate the public about the choices they have to make. The choice is the communities. It's not unlike when I have so many analogies I talk about when I visit with people. It's like buying a car. What do you want it to do? If you just want it to get you from point A to point B, and you don't care about the speed, you don't care about the windows, you don't care about windshield wipers, you could probably get by. But if you actually want a car that has air conditioning, windows that work, windshield wipers that are safe, lights, and 4 decent tires, you pay extra for that. What we have here is a departments that over the last 10 years I've watched stretch their dollars as thinly as possible. There's not been an ask done in 10 years because the temperature of the population, of the community, and the temperature of the commission hasn't allowed it. But we're at a point now, and with Rick and the others on the commission, we would be irresponsible if we didn't present this question to the public. Whether they vote yes or no, it still has to be determined. And of course, we'll all live with the decision one way or the other. But as elected officials, it's been incumbent upon us to put this choice before the community and allow them to make that choice. And I just am personally grateful to the people that are from the city staff that are here tonight and that are here every day, working under the conditions that they've explained, which are stressful at least and difficult at best. So, thank you. Madam Chair, I know I'm talking to people who've heard this pitch before and heard the presentations. And to Greg's point, we're not advocating and saying, oh, you really need to do this. But you do need to know what the consequences are of either voting for or against.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I just want to say thank you to all of you, all 4 of you have come around to all the councils. I know that you've dedicated so much time away from your families. And I just want to put that out there and say that I appreciate what you're trying to do for our city. I see you. Thank you.
All right. Okay, thank you very much. All right, thank you.
When we get back to work.
Still early.
Judging by the streets, we're gonna be working.
Yeah. Okay, everyone, moving on then to other business is our council sharing. And so we'll just go around. We'll start with Council 1. Just give us a quick update of what you've been doing and what might be coming up in your futures, if you know. So we'll start with number 1.
Well, council number 1, as always, is quiet and peaceful, so we don't have anything to report at the council of councils.
Okay, number 2.
Well, number 2, we meet at West Elementary School, and usually we don't meet during the summertime because there's no place for ADA for wheelchair accessibility to meet. So our last meeting was in September, and then last month we never had a quorum because of a couple of people were sick. But we've had a couple of people show up at our meetings. One was concerned about the 4 trailer houses that are still on 7th Street that are involved in a fire. They haven't been, they're gonna be demolished or not, and how long they're gonna sit there. Usually with my experience, what happens is the places get used by transients and stuff, and next thing you know, we have another fire and stuff there. And then the other meeting, or the other personnel I called, he had the same thing about abandoned vehicles, and so I went by his house to complain about, and I never really seen the vehicles that he was talking about. It was on private property, it wasn't in the street, so I think he was just an upset neighbor. But other than that, that's about all that's happened within that 1 month meeting we had in September.
Okay, all right, thank you. Gary?
We continue to broadcast on Facebook. That's very successful. Eric attended the Citizens Academy. I think you guys all know Eric. We did do our summer celebration in September, and it was a huge hit. We had drawings, so 4 gift baskets were given to those who attended. The fire department was there, EMT, Frosties, face painter, bouncy house, live music with Joe Ryan. He also was there. And popcorn was given by ACES, and I tried my darndest to get the helicopter, and I didn't get it done. So it's a goal for next year, and hopefully I won't stress Park and Rec out too much. But yeah, so, and then of course we have the refinery in our district, so there is a lot of discussion going on there. They did hold an open forum, which surprisingly, not an open forum, but an informational meeting. But a lot of people didn't attend. I think there were 10 of us maybe. Mm. So we continue to listen to neighbors' concerns about the smell that comes off of the refinery and vibrations. I think those have subsided. And then also we talk about CMR, from CMR to Sam's Club. We were interested in having a crosswalk put there for the high schoolers so that they can get across safely at their lunchtime. And then this week too, don't forget to treasure your teacher, hosted by our city. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Neighborhood Council 4, our last meeting will be this coming Thursday night for the year, and we're looking forward to an update from Park and Rec on the Aquatic Center.
Oh, sure.
We normally do not meet in November and December because our November meeting always falls on Thanksgiving, and our December meeting is right around Christmas, and it's tough enough getting people to attend, and it's even worse when it's on holidays. So October is normally our last meeting. We are looking forward to an update in January of a study that the Public Works Department did on 36th Street. That was done earlier in the year during the summer months, and they've been busy with so many other projects that they haven't had a chance yet to fully analyze that. But for sure in January they'll be coming to talk about what that study told them, and hopefully we won't have any upcoming changes to be made on 36, because that's been kind of an area of contention for several years. The neighbors do not want 36th Street to become a through street, so hopefully that will remain the case, but we shall see. And Eric, I just want to say this could be Eric's last Council of Councils presentation.
We don't accept.
He's hoping to resign fully. But
resign's the wrong word, retire.
Retire, all right,
Please.
Retire. Thank you.
Thank you. Resign sounds right. I mean, I know people think of me sometimes that way, but I haven't said that. Retire would be the better term. Thank you.
You do deserve it, Eric.
Oh. Okay, Sandra. So does that mean I'm up?
You're up, yeah.
So we meet during the summer. We do not meet during the month of December. Talking about the summer months. In June, we had the clinical dean from Touro College come to speak to us for the second time as the college was opening on the 1st of July with their first batch of 120 students. They still had some housing difficulties, but it's up and running, and along with her came Dr. Dolan from Benefice to speak to us about the proposed nursing school or college. That has been approved by the state. It is a line item in the budget. They are expecting to break ground in May. So if you go by the complex and you're thinking about where Touro University is, if you go cattywampus back across towards the Benefice on 29th Street, on the opposing corner is where the nursing college will be built. In July, we had a meeting with Alliance for Youth. We actually did a tour of the facility, and we had an open discussion with about 40 neighbors about the recently received property tax appraisals and the variances in different increases and what we should expect with our property taxes. In August, we had our 4th candidate forum. And as candidate forums go, reflecting back over those 8 years, it was probably the best we've ever had, based upon the fact that every candidate came except Judge Bolstead, who had a medical procedure that day, and of course he wasn't being contested on the ballot to start with. But response from the press, the public, and from the candidates themselves was all very positive, and for that effort, I was pleased. In September, because of neighbors' concerns about the increase in their homeowners insurance, they wanted to know why, what can we do about it? I said we can answer those questions by inviting the fire department to come and talk about the bond issue and why you have the increase in your fire insurance and what you can do to solve that problem. It was a great discussion, and we move on. I separated that out because the levy is discussed quite frequently, and I've been to 3 or 4 of those presentations, but the bond issue is kind of set off by its side, so I wanted to separate that out and bring it to the public. In October, we had the public safety levy. The city manager claimed we got a gold star for the turnout. The only other thing I haven't mentioned is we had ice cream social, which we've done for 4 or 5 years with our corporate sponsor. I went well. In November, we hope to solve a 10-year problem. The intersection at 11th Avenue and 32nd Street, which is right behind Super One Foods, has gotten to be a nightmare. 20 years ago, that was a 4-way stop. It was reduced to a 2-way stop because of lack of traffic on the one side coming from the Devonshire. With the Eric Boyd taking over as the manager for City and Streets for the department, he came to our March meeting and promised to give us an in-depth study. In November, he comes to give us, hopefully, the solution we're looking for. I won't attempt to put words in his mouth, only trying to pass mental impulses to get the right answer. I don't have an answer for the future. I can only hope the future will be as beneficial to the councils as it has been the last 12 years. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Eric. And we do appreciate your service. You've put in a lot of years, and
I retired, not resigned.
I'll never live this down.
I retired, I did not resign.
We'll have to be resigned to the fact that you retired.
There you go, thank
Beautiful,
you.
Lisa, good job.
All right, Earl.
I'm pinch hitting for Carl Donovan. He tested positive for COVID. He's fine, or he's not ill or badly. He's just decided he didn't want to share his virus with us all. So he made me do it here. We didn't meet this summer, and I guess the main thing I'd like to bring up is that we've been running with 3 or 4 council persons for quite a while, and we finally got a full complement with our first person, which is good. And there's 5 candidates on the ballot, which means that we'll hopefully have 5 people for quite a while. We also had the presentation for the mill levy, and afterwards it was a robust question and answer period after the presentation, and that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Lisa?
We'd had our second ice cream social in August. It wasn't as well attended, but the weather was kind of weird. We did have, I think, a lot more engagement with new people wanting to know how to be more involved. And unfortunately, some of them weren't from our council, but they saw it posted somewhere, so they just came down. So it's great to be able to share that. We had a presentation on the municipal courtroom, that new one that's going in the Missouri room. If you don't know where that's at, if you go out that door and take a left, that room in there is the Missouri room, and they gave us an idea of how that's going to look and what they're going to do to make that happen. So when they vote in the new judge for that, then we'll be able to start seeing that in the works. The Bats building, which is a historic building at 400 2nd Avenue South, they finally did the hazardous cleanup, and they just had the groundbreaking for that on the 19th of October. And what it is, if people don't know, it's 25 permanent supportive housing units with wraparound services. So for those people that need, maybe like mental health, help with getting a job, help with other medical issues, or a lot of different things, they can have all those services right there, so they don't have to go out to those things. Those things will be provided for them, so they don't have to go without or try to pick which ones they're gonna get. They can do all of those things together, so we're excited about that, especially when you get a historic building that's not just being abandoned and people are taking over with drug use and all those other kinds of things that happen. So we're excited about how that's going to go. We had a lot of issues early on in the summertime and that with the noise from the refinery, but that has been somewhat resolved. It comes and goes, I guess, a little bit, but much better than it was, so that's helped us a lot. The smell, it was bad at times, but I can't imagine what it was over on the other side of the river, so.
It's like roses.
Yeah, so we're happy about those things. Of course, our district has the highest crime rate in Great Falls. We generally have about a third of all the crime in Great Falls just in our one district. And so, obviously the mill levy is an important thing for us because we see the impact every day all the way around. The little park for the library, they're having a lot of issues with transients and a lot of people that are starting fires in the dumpster and that, and sometimes they get out of control. There's a lot of activity in the evenings, so they're trying to find a way to either maybe put a fence around it or do something else to kind of block it off, because that's a potential for issues for them, obviously, with what goes on there, and of course with all the neighbors. So hopefully they can find something that works well, kind of helps both sides. Don't have, big thing is just crime, drugs, a lot of issues with neighbors and all those kinds of things. We have some drug houses and that are kind of bad. So of course, being where we are, that just happens, and a lot of transient issues that come up. So we're continually trying to find ways to help with all that stuff, do what we can to give information and that and support to those people that come to our meetings and have those issues. So it's a full-time job just for that.
All right,
So,
thanks, Lisa.
Yep.
Travis?
We had our yearly ice cream social in July, and we actually served more people than normal. It had a very good turnout, but it was also like 80 or 90 degrees that day. And that's really about it. We haven't had much of a turnout or community involvement, so.
Okay. All right.
Well, I
thanks.
hate to end the meeting on a downer, but it's been a very disappointing year for Council 9. And the harsh reality is, it comes down to what we've heard tonight. Our first problem was a property complaint about a neighbor who basically was running a junkyard. We talked to the city attorney's office about it, and turns out the city can't do anything about it. They don't have the funds to do anything about it. It's part of the problem. Kranz Park. We've been trying to get equipment in Kranz Park, playground equipment, for many, many years. 3 years ago, we finally got the money to get the playground equipment. It sat in storage for 2 years because they didn't have money to put it in place. Last year, we got the money to put it in place, and this year we were told it was going to be put into place. They broke ground on the playground equipment about 2 weeks ago, just in time for the snow. I don't think it's even gonna make it in this year. And lastly, under the category of no good deed goes unpunished, a year ago at this council, I asked for the city to talk about the dog, barking dog complaint. That came from a complaint from a neighbor who had a neighbor with 6 dogs. And I have worked with this neighbor the whole summer, trying to get the problem resolved, made multiple phone calls. I've dealt with the police department, the city attorney's office, the city manager's office, the
district court, or not the district court, the municipal court, and trying to help this person end out. Last couple of weeks ago, it escalated to a battle between the two neighbors, which involved in charges being filed. I had to be out of town that week, and because I wasn't able to be there for the court appearance, the neighbor took it out on me, called Lanny, told Lanny I had lied to her and that no longer wanted me to help her, and I was just part of the problem. I wasn't solving the problem or anything else. And it comes down to the ordinance sucks. The police department is doing what they can do. I have tried, I've been kept abreast of what's going on, and I know where they're at. The problem is still there because of the way the ordinances work. But, we do what we can. And Eric, I've been at it for 6 years. I attempted to retire this year myself. 3 of my council members declined to run for re-election, which only left 2 of us. And so I was talked into sticking around for another couple of years, at least. And fortunately, we got 2 new people on the ballot, so we're gonna be good this year. And one of them said that they would come back if necessary. But that's where we're at. Hopefully we'll have a better year next year.
So addressing, Barney, what you said, I wrote Lanny and told her, because of my age, I thought it was probably time that I moved on. So once my council heard I was doing that, the other 4 withdrew. So when you look at our ballot, there's not a single name on there. I've had 2 phone calls tonight. The first one was from an attorney. Now, I don't normally accept phone calls from attorneys. Right away, that bothers me,
Especially at night.
Yeah, especially at night, right, exactly. Asked me what the hell's going on, so anyway. He promised me he was going to give Lanny 3 names. I said, I hope I get about a dozen more phone calls. I can get her 36 or 40 names. Anyway, God forbid. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, the only thing is though, Barney, see, Eric is going to be, 89 years old, so see, that's what you're looking at there.
Yeah,
If you don't.
I turned 76 next month.
Well,
Oh,
there you go, you have 13 more years to go. I just wanted to kind of, you already are having a bad year there, Barney,
Right.
so just thought I'd add Well, thank you, everybody. Do we have any agenda suggestions for our meeting in January? I know some of you may not be the delegate in January, but any ideas of anything you'd like to see on the agenda? Do you want to talk about the barking dog ordinance?
No, it all depends on the levy.
Okay.
And that's, the legal department doesn't have the time to redo the ordinance. That's what it comes down to. They've got more important things to deal with.
Hopefully the neighbors will not resort to such violence that
Well,
it ends
there's
up
been
taking
threats.
care of itself. That, oh my, yeah, not good. Both of them were charged, were they? Both
No.
charged? Oh.
The one with the dogs climbed on the fence of the one that, and she squirted him with a hose, and he pressed charges.
Did they arrest the dogs? I mean, they're the ones that the problem, the dogs are the problem, did they arrest the dogs?
I understand, and that's what she's hoping, when she get to court, she can explain the whole deal about the dogs, but I have a feeling all they're gonna wanna know is, did you squirt him or didn't you squirt him? They don't really care about the dogs. But she's hoping to resolve the dog problem by going to court. She wants a jury trial.
Mm.
Can't we
Okay.
just get the dog some edibles and they'll be nice and mellow?
Yeah.
I mean,
Particular kind of animal.
yeah, and then you support a local business that is selling those, and then, I don't know, there's gotta be a solution that's not so bad,
Believe me, I've tried.
All right, well, if you have any ideas between now and January, you can get in touch with me or Lanny. But we'll for sure have an agenda for January. Under petitions and communications, do we have any resident concerns? Resident concerns,
too many in one meeting.
right? All right, well, hearing none then, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So we adjourn.
Second?
I second.
Okay.